I call to order the Planning Commission meeting of April 25, 2023. We can proceed with roll call.
Mr. Holman,
Here.
Mr. Coots,
Here.
Ms. Lazaris,
Here?
Mr. Grady, Mrs. Bishop,
Here.
Mr. Foster, Dr. Mason.
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next, we have item number 3, correction and/or approval of the meeting minutes of March 28. Would anyone like to make a motion concerning the minutes of March 28th?
I'll move to accept as printed.
Mr. Coots will second.
Mr. Holman moved and Mr. Coots seconded to approve the minutes of March 28th. Is there any discussion? All right. Hearing none, then we'll proceed with a roll call vote.
Mr. Coots,
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Foster, Dr. Mason,
Aye.
Mr. Holman.
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right, thank you. Next is item number 4, questions and public comment. The public may address the commission at this time regarding items on the agenda, unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. We do have no public hearing tonight. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the commission on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep comments limited to 3 minutes. State your name and address. When starting comments, also fill out the sign-in sheet at the podium. For people online, please type your name and address in the chat feature. Are there any public comments at this time?
Hi, Elizabeth Patton, 365 West Prospect Street, and I have the on the docket here for the Planning Commission to look at selling off a portion of my property for a second primary residence behind my home. I guess I just wanted to touch base with, I don't really know what the format is for this, so I just wanted to give a little bit of feedback. It's a large piece of property for me to manage, and it is sort of becoming increasingly harder as a primary owner of the place, and time, resources, and physical challenges of maintaining a small jungle back there. It's a gorgeous piece of land, but could really use some more attention and resources applied to it. So I think it could be an opportunity to develop a new house. And I think in the summary I heard back, I think there's 49.75 on the plat maps that I have of frontage space on Pine Street, which would make us like 3 inches below the required amount from what I'm seeing. I don't think this would create a hardship. I think it could be a benefit to the neighbors and community in improving the property and some of the beauty to that area. It is a pretty unique piece of property, and I think for me some of the challenges are without having somebody right back there, there's some encroachment and sort of confusion about lines and things on property lines. So that is what I wanted to say. I don't know if there's any questions or how this works now.
Thank you, Ms. Patton. Not at this time. Your item is going to be number 5 next, and and what we'll likely do is we'll suspend the rules to ask you questions directly when that comes up. So thank you for giving us the preview of that, and then we can. And it's good you're here, and we appreciate that.
Sorry for jumping the gun. Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, item number 4, public comment is open, and for a public comment.
Hi, I'm Patricia Cicero, the director of the Jefferson County Land and Water Conservation Department. I live at 517 College Street. Just got up to say thank you for considering the comments I provided for the Ag and Natural Resources section of the comprehensive plan. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those when you get to that item.
All right,
Thank you.
Ms. Cicero. All right. Item number 4, public comment is still open.
Anita Martin, we live at 261 Pinnacle Drive in Lake Mills. Regarding the Ag and Natural Resources section of the plan, I just wanted to share a couple of thoughts. I believe it's under Section 2-10, Watersheds and Surface Waters. The statement reads, "The city should continue to support these and other efforts to protect Rock Lake and Rock Creek water quality." I would like to see you consider changing this and say the city should continue to support these and other efforts to protect Rock Lake, Mud Lake, and Rock Creek water quality. The reason behind this is that Mud Lake is an important drainage lake, and it's important to water quality in the watershed. Let's see what else.
Ms. Martin, could you just repeat that last line of what you are suggesting it should say? I didn't quite get it down.
Sure, okay. So the city should continue to support these efforts to protect Rock Lake, Mud Lake, and Rock Creek water quality. The other was just sort of an explanation area. I mean, it could be included too, that Mud Lake is an important drainage lake and impacts water quality in the watershed. And then 2-27 under vegetative strips, while the comment is made that the plan is not meant to be necessarily mandating practices, perhaps consider adding the statement, "Native plant buffers provide many more benefits than non-natives, including erosion control due to branching and deep roots, habitat, and infiltration of stormwater." On page 29, perhaps consider a statement that erosion control is needed on construction sites in the city that are under 1 acre in size. And then under natural resource goals, objectives, and policies, the section that says the city will work with Jefferson County, the Joint Rock Lake Committee, and then adding Rock Lake Improvement Association and other entities. I would like to ask if you would consider these comments to prioritize and implement the objectives of the 2018 and 2028 Rock Lake Management Plan. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Ms. Martin. The public comment period under item 4 is still open. Is there anyone else who wishes to make comment at this time? Is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment during this time period? Would anyone else like to comment under item number 4? All right. Hearing nothing further, we close item number 4 and we go on to item number 5. Concept review, land division via certified survey map at 365 West Prospect Street. And we'll start with, Mr. Wolf, if you would give us an overview of what the request is being proposed on this lot and the issues that going on with this through lot at this time. So we'll start with you, and then we may ask questions of the applicant.
Thank you, Mrs. Ars. So as Ms. Patton had talked about under public comment, she owns a property at 365 West Prospect. We're kind of highlighting it here on the screen, the memo. It's also available online for anyone to follow along. Ms. Patton is looking to submit a certified survey map, which is the formal instrument to subdividing property. But obviously, there are zoning and, more importantly, subdivision code requirements that need to be met in relation to subdividing property. So the properties are zoned R14, which is a single-family district. They require 10,000 square feet of land area. This property is not quite an acre and a half in area, so much larger. She's proposing 2 lots. I'm gonna go ahead here real quick. So we have a little more detail. So everybody can see this. 2 lots, one on the south, which is where the existing residence is, and then you can see on the north, the little dashed line in the middle, the yellow would be thereabouts the line to subdividing it. One of the issues that we run into here is the configuration of the lot and meeting lot frontage and lot width requirements. We have a 50-foot width requirement for frontage on property on roadways, and then we have a minimum depth at the base setback line. In truth, this is to prohibit the creation of flag lots. That's a little challenging when we're looking at a situation like this, where the flag was created years ago, right? And so I don't want to say it's a perfect apples-to-apples consideration. Lot 1, where the existing residence would be legal and conforming and comply with all the requirements, it's Lot 2 that is obviously the issue at hand here. There is a provision in the subdivision code that does enable the Plan Commission to find exceptional circumstances, excuse me here, that could exist. So where little enforcement of the requirements would result in severe hardship, trying to avoid recurrent nature of these situations, meaning the potential for creation of more flag lots in and around the community. Obviously, other findings are preservation of property rights, that it wouldn't have a negative impact on property rights and enjoyment of property, that there isn't detriment on neighboring properties. I think the biggest key here, though, is minimum of 5 affirmative Plan Commission votes are required to pass this. So not a simple majority if it were to happen. And I want to understand, there's no formal action required tonight on this. Before Ms. Patton goes through the expense to create a certified survey map, obviously there's surveys have to be hired, an instrument has to be created. She's looking to get the feedback from the Plan Commission on this, if there's support for the special exception to create the lot as she is proposing it, which would be substandard in certain areas, that you are finding that there would be these exceptional circumstances, property rights are preserved, and there's no detriment to adjacent properties. I think one of the things that just has to be evaluated here is, obviously, if a home is located in here, you'll have a driveway coming off of Pine Street, very obvious there, and you'll have a home kind of situated in the backyards of all the other homes. So it is an important, while it's a lovely piece of property and big and certainly would be nice for a house, I do think you have to evaluate the impact on surrounding properties of having a home sited in a way that front yards could be in backyards and such. So I'm sure you want to talk to Ms. Patton about this, but we can certainly, as staff, field any other questions you may have on this. But it's I'll say a relatively straightforward request. There's not too many options here. It's either that there is a finding of that those special exceptions and circumstances are met, or they aren't, and providing Ms. Patton with a direction on whether she should move forward with a certified survey map that would then be submitted for review and approval at a staff level.
Okay, all right, thank you, Mr. Wolf. Planning Commissioners, we heard from Ms. Patton about her request that she will formally make Plan Commissioners, do you have any questions or observations, questions of her? She is here today. First, if I may, I'd like to ask for a motion to suspend the rules to ask her questions. Is there a motion?
Mr. Holman will make a motion to suspend the rules.
Mr. Coots will second.
Mr. Holman moved and Mr. Coots seconded to suspend the rules so we can ask Ms. Patton questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone against? Okay. All right, that is
Do we
taken
have,
care of.
we can have questions too?
Yes, certainly.
Wolf?
You can ask questions of staff, you can ask questions
Yeah.
of.
Can you define a flag lot again? I don't know if I missed that.
So a flag lot is one,
Flagpole.
as you can see here, kind of there's a flagpole, a very narrow component to the lot, as you see coming off of Pine. And then, again, what would be the flag is the larger portion. We avoid these, and the codes are written to prohibit these because they do result in future problems when someone's creating them first time. Again, this is a situation where kind of the flag exists. I don't know why it was platted in this way. But sometimes then you get people who want to have a series of flags in a row with driveways on them or a shared driveway, and they don't have frontage on a public roadway. So you get a lot of homes sitting back. You'll find them generally in the rural areas of adjacent communities. It's not an ideal situation and causes, say, planning and utility service issues down the road for municipalities. But again, it's a situation where this flag does exist, so.
So specifically under the zoning code definition 650-7, a flag lot is defined as a lot not fronting on or abutting a public street and where access to the public street system is by a narrow strip of land and where the area of the lot for zoning purposes shall not include the narrow strip of land. So they're really specifically talking about that access point. That's the flagpole.
Also on that is Maple Street. What's the deal there?
Yeah.
None.
On that,
On Prospect?
No,
it's a
It-
maple,
the plat looks like it was originally platted for a street to be going approximately where the flag is.
go back. If you blow it up just to the,
Oh, I'd have to go to the. So this is the lot.
The first screen that you opened up had it on there.
One of the right-of-ways is like mislabeled or something?
no, it's in black, but it's,
I think Miss Patton had something to say on that while we were looking.
yeah, blow that up,
Mabel?
right there.
Maple Street. There's a through street.
Mabel
plan
or
that never
Maple?
went.
Mabel.
Bell?
Well,
Maple.
it says Mabel. However, at one time, I would assume that it was abandoned and the right-of-way went to the property owners.
Sorry, I'll need to go to.
Okay, also where 2 is,
Yeah, what you're seeing here is a vacation document
Vacation, yeah, it's vacated.
is what it's
I would-
illustrating there.
Yeah, I would assume that took place. And it no longer is a right-of-way.
1960.
Is that correct to your understanding, Miss Patton, as well? It is. Okay, she's nodding yes.
That's why it looks the way it does.
I think this is a good example where an exception clause could be used. This is typical where you end up with development around it, and then you're left with a
Yeah.
parcel of shape, and I think the infill would be better than just leaving it like it is.
I do want to remind the commission that there's no mechanism here that neighbors would be notified of any of this, so please do understand that.
Right, right. Well, that
Okay.
may be, but, the only other possibility would be that she would work extraordinarily hard to gain more property from either Trinity Lutheran or the property that is to the west of her, or both, and somehow get that frontage, and then what? Then what would happen is perhaps you'd have a lot that has conforming frontage, and then it goes back a certain way, and it actually would be sufficient for its own lot. Now you've created an interior lot that's not usable.
And also the neighbors, and I'm not speaking for the neighbors, obviously, but that'd be their backyards. It seems like the development of this lot for the new owner would potentially put a front yard against a backyard, but that would be their choice. It wouldn't be like,
Right.
inhibiting a existing property owner from doing something in their backyard.
Right. Right.
Just an opinion.
Justin, could
if I
you
may.
go back where you had lot one and two? Yeah, what is, where two is? Not lot two, but number two? What's that round thing there?
I assume it's some improvement on the property?
Yeah, I don't think it exists.
You don't? Okay,
It's not currently there, so perhaps from.
The aerial's a couple years old.
oh,
Kathleen.
Oh, there you go.
so it's of nothing important.
No.
Okay,
I have one more question. As far as setbacks go, how would you define, for a front setback then, side setback? That'd be my only question.
It's a great question. Technically, we'd only have, I think, 30 feet or 25 feet from the public right-of-way. And then it would have, the rear might be the south side of it. And then you have a series of side setbacks. I mean, again, these become challenges when someone wants to put a home on it, right?
Well, is there any difference from somebody else in one of these other lots? Like, you can't build a zero lot line building. So wouldn't the same requirement apply to lot two?
That you couldn't build a zero lot line building?
I mean, yeah, I'm assuming the rest of the zoning in this area says you can't build a zero lot line, like right up against the lot line.
You
So-
have to follow the bulk ordinances, certainly the bulk regulations, which setbacks and such you're discussing. I think the question that was asked is really about orientation. There are certain portions of the code that apply specifically to front yards versus rear yards. And I think that's really what the question was about
Okay.
there. How would this property be oriented for definitional purposes?
Well, if it's not fronting a street, in all technicalities, I don't know, I'll leave it at that.
We do have these, we were talking about earlier today at a staff meeting, that some of these properties do exist along the lake where they only have easement access to a property that was platted decades ago. So it's not something that we haven't dealt with, but usually in those cases, it's a series of properties that only have easement access. They're all kind of oriented the same way. This one would be challenging because whichever way you orient it, it's going to be facing someone's backyard. I think logic would dictate that the front door or the garage would be facing north or garage facing east, right? And so the two other lots on Pine Street would have, their backyard would be looking into someone's front of their building. But there's a large building envelope on Lot 2, so they could theoretically kind of rotate the building pad itself and kind of orient it kind of to the northeast. There's a lot of options in there. You can understand why we don't want the creation of new flag lots, right? It becomes a kind of a series of problems. So.
I think I guess one thing to consider is it is a pre-existing irregular lot. And so perhaps a creative way of looking at it is you could look at it as lot one is the newly created parcel, which means that you would actually be creating a conforming lot, and the existing parcel would then be the leftover remnant of what is irregularly shaped now. So you could choose to interpret it as the creation of a conforming lot, in that lot one is a conforming lot there, and the flag is pre-existing.
Yeah.
The existing lot is conforming though, then. We're not taking a non-conforming thing and making it conforming. We're taking a conforming thing and saying it's still conforming then.
True. Yeah. It can, yeah. I mean, my assumption is that because of the size of the lot, it's going to be able to meet the bulk regulation requirements of anything that you would put on there. And so really the question comes down to whether the Plan Commission would like to have a flag lot create, to make a flag lot buildable essentially in this area. And like Dustin has said before, it's an existing irregular shape, which may be a factor in your consideration that you're not creating new flag lots, you're not creating a new irregularly shaped lot. You wouldn't do something like this in a lot that you would draw from scratch. So I understand the considerations of which ways it face, the backyards, the front yards, what it's going to be in an odd location, but there are considerations as to why an exception may be warranted.
So I know it was said at the beginning of the meeting and in this memo that there's no decision being expected tonight from the Plan Commission. But then on page 3, it says, will not be granted unless the Plan Commission finds all of the following facts and conditions exist and so indicates in the minutes of its proceedings. Is a mere discussion sufficient, or are we expecting this to come back maybe at the next meeting or in some future meeting for an actual resolution?
It will have to come back. Concept reviews are more for applicants to kind of get feedback and understand if it's worth pursuing the concept that they're putting forward, to limit the investment they have to make and the costs they incur. If at the concept review, the Plan Commission, there was not support for something like this, then it would indicate that to the applicant that they may not submit a formal application. So it's just a way to get some feedback from the Plan Commission before moving forward with a formal application.
Would the intent of the lot, if they would put the house there, would it be to use the flag post as the driveway, or would it share Trinity's driveway because it's already paved right up over the lot line at this point?
Well, I think Trinity is taking some liberties maybe they shouldn't be, with some politeness. The expectation is the driveway would be coming through the flag.
So you can, you can just, Madam Chair, you can simply ask members to weigh in as to whether they're open to something like this and whether it's worth it to move forward with an application, and kind of give that feedback to the applicant.
Well, Plan Commission members, if you would comment on whether you would be amenable to this arrangement. I mean, if you didn't do this, then you have the way it is now, which I don't consider a good thing, and makes a waste of space. But I think if this was done as she proposes, then if it was me, I would face whatever house is there, I would face it towards the east, towards what at one time was Maple Street, and then it would be back to back with the houses that neighbors, and the garage also could be facing east, and so that would be easy to get into. But that would be me if I had this, and this applicant is looking for a solution to a difficult property. Property is difficult. What is supposed to be done? Now, if Maple Street had not been vacated, I don't think we would be here talking about what she should do, but it was, and so this is where we're at. I don't care for it very much, but I don't see that, unless one were to say, oh, well, we're going to demand an entire replatting of all this property west of the church, I don't see that. So this is a reasonable solution in my view. Commissioners, what do you think?
I'm also confident in allowing it to move forward. Confident with staff, after we would allow this to move forward, for them to make some determinations on which side would be the best for the front, so that the setbacks could be understood by the applicant.
Well, I think we've spent a year discussing how infill development is appropriate for our city and making the best use of available lots and land and keeping the footprint of our city, as well as utilizing available utility hookups so we don't have to expand further when there's no other, nobody else out there. It seems like on its face, what is currently being proposed fits within the parameters that we've been discussing in terms of the best use of land in our city.
I got a question. Let's just imagine that they split it up into 2 lots, but they sold the lot to the church. Could the church just build whatever they want on that lot?
You'd have to comply with zoning and all the other regulations that would go with the lot. It would still be a separate parcel. So there's a variety of things they likely could do with it, but they would have to comply with the code.
Like if they wanted to build a building that was like a meeting space or something like that.
Yeah, so in the R14 district, the institutional uses, religious uses are permitted by a conditional use, specifically to evaluate potential impacts on surrounding properties. Traffic is usually the most notable, right? Churches and schools historically have been the center of neighborhoods, as they should be. Keep neighborhoods walkable and to have that kind of, I'll say, civic investment within them. But yes, there would be a process they would have to go through to make improvements on their property.
Essentially what you're suggesting we would do in this situation with a potential private residence.
Well, again, if it's zoned R14, so single family, we do not at a city level require any level of review of a new home permit other than complying with bulk regulations. Because this is exceptions to the subdivision code, does not follow like the zoning variance process, zoning board of appeals process. So there isn't a notification that goes out to neighbors that this has happened. I think the moment someone puts a shovel in the ground out there, I think you get a lot of questions from the neighbors as to, about it. So, and it's why one of the findings needs to be absence of detriment to surrounding property owners. And you are the group tasked with finding that there is an absence of detriment to surrounding property owners.
We can provide notice if you would if the Plan Commission would like. We're not required to, but we could provide notice that the application would be coming forward. It would be a direct mailer is how we would do it, but if that is a concern of the Plan Commission and that's feedback that the Plan Commission would like, we certainly can do that.
If I can add, I would strongly suggest Ms. Patton talk to her neighbors about, I want to do this. We've had developers in the past talk to adjacent properties. It certainly is in the best interest to try to have open dialogue with your neighbors as to what's happening out there, because those neighbors certainly have had the enjoyment of somebody else's investment, meaning ownership of that property, and may think it's just going to stay that way.
I'm, as far as where I'm at, I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence because I do understand the infill and, the situation, but at the same time, I can't get over if I had one of those 5 or 6 houses, I wouldn't want a house going up in my backyard. I wouldn't want to solve one problem by creating a whole, a new series of hurt feelings. And in addition, and I understand that it's not the property owner's fault if the neighboring property owner has gone way over the line, but at the same time, it's going to start, there could be potential issues on that side of it too, when someone comes and starts digging up 2 feet of asphalt or something like that, in one strip. So knowing how the neighboring property owners feel about that would go a long ways in my mind as far as making up my mind. The exceptional circumstance and the necessary for the enjoyment and preservation, I understand that the lot itself is an exceptional circumstance, but the lot's been an exceptional circumstance for 63 years now, so I'm wondering why, why now, if there's something special about the timing now that this is coming up versus 50 years ago or 50 years from now. So, and again, having the neighbor's point of view on that would probably go a long ways for informing my decision.
I would agree with Mr. Coots. At first, I would be like, property owners, do what you want with your property. That said, in this situation, I feel like I'm assuming, I want to make sure that my assumption's out there, that the person who owns this property bought it knowing what they got. And I'm also assuming that the people that are surrounding this property bought their property assuming that that lot wasn't going to get subdivided and then turned into another house, which informs my decision to say, no, I would not be on board with this, unless it came out that all these property owners were fine with it, which I'm assuming, again, that that's probably not the case.
I agree with that to an extent, but in an R4 zone, and there's vacant property, I would automatically assume that an I-4 conforming house could be built there, even if it was vacant for 63 years.
Yeah.
I would just assume that. It's not, I'm pleased to hear your opinion. However, my opinion is, take Brookstone, for instance, they're building new houses. My son built out there, vacant lots all around, and before he moved in, there's another house built. It's just part of being in that zoning area. That's just my opinion, but
Yeah.
appreciate your comments.
Yeah.
So I would be in favor of moving ahead.
All right, well, you have the comments from the Plan Commission, and I think that that's advised to move, it could move ahead, and I would encourage Ms. Patton to move ahead with her solution to a difficult lot.
Okay, so we'll stay in contact with the potential applicant, and then just one final reminder that it's a supermajority of the Plan Commission, so 5 of 7, in order to grant the exception. But we'll keep in contact with Ms. Patton, and this may come back before you at your next meeting.
Aye. Okay. All right, very good. Thank you, Mr. Daly. All right, well, we've heard the matter, and we look forward to this will come back. And so we move on then to item number 6, discussion on comprehensive plan update. And we'll have Mr. Wolf give us the update as it stands today.
Thank you. So a lot of materials were provided to you in advance for you to look forward to reading, and from the updates from last month. Very quickly, I'm going to talk a little bit schedule. So one of the things to talk about tonight is finalizing the Ag, Cultural, and Natural Resources chapter. We'll do that in a second, based upon the markup, the red line that was provided to you. Finalize anything related to the implementation chapter you're looking to, and then kind of this is the review of, I'll say, the full draft. Looking ahead a little bit, the goal here is to go to take the full drafts to the Public Works and Parks Boards next month, and any others, and I'm looking at Drake that feels it may need to go to. And then coming back to you next month for kind of the final draft and potentially a review and approval of a resolution of saying that it's time for the open book period in essence, and to move it forward to potentially a public hearing in June. So there's a 30-day open book period that doesn't commence until you, as a commission, pass a resolution saying so. As always, just want to remind people, still taking public comment. Hard copies of a comment form are available at City Hall, and then certainly taking them. It's available online, and emails certainly can come into city staff people on any of the issues yet. So don't want to make it sound like this is it. You have to wait till the public hearing. No, we're always looking for feedback on chapters. But with that, I'm going to move to the red line of the Ag, Natural, and Cultural Resources chapter. Ms. Cicero and then Rock Lake Improvement Association provided some detailed written comments, and where they were, I'll call them non-substantive changes. Some of them were some additional or complementary language or minor changes. We've just incorporated them, and they are part of the red line. I wasn't going to spend really too much time on those specific items. But there are places where some of the requested language or changes we felt are policy directives that we do need your feedback on whether or not to make those specific changes to the text that you've already reviewed. Also included in this, I'll say memo, which is the red line of the chapter, are all of their comments at the end, so everybody can see them. So, sorry, just scrolling through. You can certainly see where comments have been included, some minor changes to them. So this first one, which I know is a little challenging to read when you're looking at red lines, define what measures were taken related to water quality. We were not proposing changes here. They are outlined elsewhere in documents or other documents in more detail. And then the shoreline preservation ordinance, which is in the zoning code, also talks about native plantings and how to encourage buffers and how to prevent shore erosion, et cetera. So we felt it was really not prudent to put it here, but we'll defer to the commissioners.
I would agree with that assessment. that it's best found in other, best found elsewhere. I can remember thinking that initially when I saw it last month and then reviewing that sort of thing. I would agree.
Gosh, could you just, I just didn't understand. Could you just explain? I just want to make the connection. I don't understand what the comment was to. Could you just explain it, Dustin?
The two organizations are asking for more detail on what measures have been taken about management of water level, shore erosion, et cetera. And again, we've, I think, been challenged here at sometimes getting into details that are better handled in other documents or outlined in other codes and ordinances. And so there are times when we just make reference to kind of the broader programs or initiatives that are going on at the city level. There are, and as this group has mentioned, each of these groups kind of take on their own studies related to these things. The comp plan, again, I think one of the challenges of the comp plan is sometimes it's a little too general, but it's by design to be broadly applicable. When we talked about sidewalks and bicycle paths and lanes, et cetera, there are other documents that really drill down on those issues. So we were asked to kind of remove very specific statements in those chapters of the comprehensive plan. Similar kind of situation here from our perspective.
Ms. Israel, it looks like you want to make a comment. Commissioners, we need to, a motion, please, and a second to suspend the rules to allow a comment at this time.
I would move to suspend the rules and allow Ms. Cicero to make a comment at this time.
Mr. Grady, second.
It's been moved by Mrs. Bishop and seconded by Mr. Grady to suspend the rules to allow a comment, and we'll open it up to anyone who has a comment now, because that would just be a blanket comment, I think. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay, Ms. Cicero.
When I made my comment about the and recent measures to protect shoreland areas, as a reader of this document, I just didn't know what was meant by that. I would suggest if you want to refer back to your existing other documents in the city, you might want to say, please see, this document or that document, whatever it refers to. So I wasn't expecting you to list a whole bunch of extra things. I just had no idea what that meant. So if there's another document to refer to, you might want to consider that.
Well, yes, I think, the references to existing documents that are already there as guiding documents would, of course, be helpful, and I think that we want to make sure that any such references can be found, because we might know that today, but if we are to look at it a few years from now, we might not remember that. So the reference, and then the day comes when the reference is different, then you can make an update to the comprehensive plan at that time. Oh, Mr. Wolf.
I just want to make sure I'm waiting to make sure discussion. Sorry, I'm waiting to make sure discussion is done before move on. Or
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
There was comments made about outlining or addressing mud lake degradation, and we would need some guidance on that. On its inclusion, or?
Well, plan commissioners, what do you think about that? If you, for me, I would say that mentioning it along with Rock Lake and Rock Creek would be I think that would be a good idea, because, you know, it's not like it would fall out of consideration and vanish into anyone's thought, but it's worthwhile, I think, to mention it and take so little space to do it. So that's just what I think would be appropriate to, it's worth listing.
I think it's okay to list it as well.
Okay.
My only question is, how far do you want to expand out? You know, and what about Bean Lake? And what about, you know, and we could go further and further.
Yeah, I respect that there probably needs to be a line in the sand or the line in the shoreline, but perhaps it was important enough for members of these groups to bring them to our attention. I think if there was more that they wanted to indicate, they probably would have done so, but.
Well, my impression is that they well studied these chapters, and this is what they focus on. And it's important to look at the comments and to consider them.
I'm going to move on.
Of course, yeah.
One of the comments that came from Jefferson County was kind of rewording this last highlighted paragraph to establish the Plan Commission and City Council's stance on findings associated with these resources. We were really just trying to highlight what came out of the focus group meetings there. There are places, I think, where if there are going to be very direct statements about actions that the Plan Commission is going to take or the council is to take, I think those are better placed in other places. You know, this was more of a, here's where those focus groups have stood on what's happened to date and some of the other educational things that are important to the community. But this wasn't like an action statement paragraph in the sense of the Plan Commission's specific opinion or decision or direction on this item, or the council for that matter is highlighted here. I think there are other places where, you know, those directives would be more appropriate. And again, those are policy decisions, of course, for the Plan Commission and the council.
Right, yeah, the comprehensive plan it's just a comprehensive plan. It's not an implementation tool. What is in the comprehensive plan, there are implementation tools for, and that is where we focus such things. I agree with you.
Others just
Look fine to me.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm just
Whenever we're silent, you could jump in.
when there's silence, I should step in. Okay.
Yeah. That's what I recommend.
Okay. This is just an area we reworded based on the input received from the organizations. Again, updated language. There was more comments about the glacial heritage area that they asked, and this is another situation where we were introducing some readers to the fact that there is a glacial heritage area. Here's what it means, but there is a 400-page document that just deals with the glacial heritage area. In this plan, we were referencing its value to the community, raising, I'll say, awareness for some, and that the city is supportive of the glacial heritage, those initiatives by the WDNR. But we didn't feel that this was the place to get into much more detail on that, because again, there's a tome on that. So, and I'm sorry, we have a comment about the corp. Remember, we do have the comprehensive outdoor rec plan, which is the master plan for the community when it comes to recreational facilities, which is active and passive recreational facilities. So a little more detail there. So I guess, is there concurrence with what staff has done here, or?
Oh, certainly, yeah. I
Okay.
remember when that came out, I believe it was 2009, and it was a very important observations and an accompanying document.
I was on that steering committee. It went about 3 years.
Mhm.
So when it comes to goals, objectives, and policies, the Rock Lake Improvement Association is asking for stronger language such as will require, must, rather than strive to or will consider. And these are very specific policy directives that need to be made. So we've had this conversation in all chapters on where, again, the line should be on certain language. And
So we have had a lot of conversations about these, and I think at every turn, we've tried to say that we will protect, we strive to do this whenever possible, we're looking at this, we'll consider, to the extent that we're gonna start directing the council or the city to put in certain policies here in this document, I have not supported along the way, and I don't support that at this time for these instances.
I see some head nodding. I just want to make sure that with Ms. Bishop's statement, so.
I'm on the same
Yeah.
page as
Yeah.
Ms. Bishop.
Okay.
Yeah, she has stated that ideally.
Yeah, those conversations were had very early on in the whole comprehensive planning process, and we've tried to
Certainly.
adhere to that throughout, which I do respect. For some groups, the language may not be authoritative enough or definitive enough for them, but again, that's a directive we've taken from you.
Yeah.
Here they're asking for a policy statement regarding their groundwater quality study. Should policies be added for that recommends the reviewing or incorporating the findings of the study? Again, the directive we have taken from you is that when there are many organizations undertaking many studies, that the city is supportive of those studies and will evaluate them and their findings in relation to other policies and priorities of the community. So I'm looking to you to, again, provide feedback here.
First off, I see this as a balancing act. We've tried to be general in a lot of areas and not list, certain resources, websites, because the second you put them down, they change. And I've even noticed things in this draft that we have today that have already changed. But to the extent that, Rock Lake Improvement Association has been a long-standing association here, I think it's okay to add that and mention it. And the Rock Lake Management Plan has been something that has been brought up to council, brought up to Plan Commission, and mentioned multiple times. So I think here it is okay to mention those things, to say that we will consider these items when we're looking at our policies, and we will work with these organizations, since they are such a long-standing, large, organizations that do have impact here. I think it's okay to mention it here as a policy. I'm not trying to backtrack on the last statement, but again, these are those organizations that are at the forefront of what needs to be done for Rock Lake, and they are bringing about those considerations at every turn for us to consider, and we do appreciate that, and that should be mentioned at some point here, and so that's probably a good place to do it.
And again, we feel that the statement, so there's certainly been the request to make sure that we're referencing the Rock Lake Improvement Association directly. Of course, we mentioned the county. We feel the language says that, the city says it will work with these organizations to prioritize objectives from their studies and management plans, but we aren't mandating in the language we're putting together. It is really that these things need to be evaluated with a myriad of other things that the city is working on. And I think, as Ms. Bishop said, we've taken the direction of not trying to sort of legislate through this document. But as you can see, we've included these groups where they should be referenced to make sure that it's known the hard work that they're doing, the value they bring to the community, and the importance of, which we heard through the focus groups, was greater communication, greater involvement of the city with these organizations. So that was the approach we've taken.
Is that your we? Is that when you said we? Who do you mean by we? The city council or us?
I don't recall which sentence you're referring to specifically, but we as in the city recognize the contributions that these groups have made. I'll say we, the royal we, I, Catherine, recognize those contributions. Maybe I don't speak for everybody else, and that's fine.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is important to consider the studies that have been done and the input that these organizations have. And so, if I can't speak for we as in the city, that's fine. But that's where I stand on it in those statements, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
With that, the next one is, I'll say to me, a very significant policy. It deals with PFAS, which are kind of the forever chemicals, if you will, commonplace in firefighting. This is asking for policies to be changed or added related to PFAS and the concerns associated with identifying them and the implications of them, and then specifically requiring the fire department to work with the DNR to remove PFAS from foam used for fire responses. So we generally do not get to this level in the comprehensive plan where we're mandating that the fire department shall or shouldn't do something.
So, Mr. Wolf, we did a PFAS study last year at the city council level. When I say we, I'm referring now to city council. Amazingly enough, the study found, and this was done at the state level, I believe, or higher, that there was no PFAS found in our current water supply. And I think even Rock Lake, I would have to go back and look at the study specifically. So PFAS is a concern. It should be something that we continue to keep an eye on. What I'm getting at, though, is when I had this discussion at the city council level and I was sitting here with city council, I asked, is the fire department, have they moved on? Are they using different chemicals that are not PFAS? And I was told that this fire department no longer uses those PFAS chemicals in their current supply. So I think to the extent that that's already been addressed at that level, I don't feel a need to address it here in this comp plan, knowing that we've already kind of moved on.
That is correct, and that's my understanding as well. The other concern I have about that statement specifically is there isn't state standards that have been adopted with regard to the presence of PFAS. There is no line that's starkly drawn right now. So I think this is an issue that compliance is going to be required in the future from a federal and state standpoint, and I'd be a little bit hesitant to put too many burdens on the city or its processes with regard to the unknowns that we simply don't have at this time.
Our next statement is related to street trees in the urban forest. There's a request to change the policy to reflect concerns, use of herbicides and pesticides within 75 feet of the lake, and incorporating stronger language, use of native street trees, and protection of existing trees in new development. We do certainly reference the preference for native trees. We do in the zoning code have a very clear listing when it comes to development guidelines that outlines the native trees that are desired here. That was developed with the previous Parks and Forestry Director when we wrote the zoning code to make sure that, who also owns a nursery, to make sure that these were the preferred kind of listing in there. We do have, I'll say, and we've seen over the last few years, the number of shoreline projects that have come forward and have been evaluated. But the comment about stronger language for, about use of herbicides and pesticides within 75 feet, it's not something we typically get into in a zoning code. I think that would be somewhere else in a municipal code. I think at that point, you're also flirting with issues related to phosphorus and, drew a blank on the word. Fertilizer, thank you, Dan. So we do need direction on how to handle this comment.
So the use of pesticides and herbicides is a huge issue, specifically glyphosate, and I don't know why people still use it, but they do. But to the extent that we cover it yet again in a comprehensive plan, I don't feel like that's appropriate. This is something I would love for the Rock Lake associations to have educational materials on, to discuss this with people, who have lakeshore property. I feel like that is where they can best get in there and start educating people and consumers and property owners. I don't feel like right here in this paragraph in this comp plan is the time and place to do it.
Would maybe a statement about the city supports the Rock Lake Improvement Association and Jefferson County in developing and working on educating the public about concerns related to these items?
I'm open to that, given what the rest of the plan commissioners would like to do. I just don't want to start setting policy here where you, as a property owner, are banned from using a certain pesticide. And there are even organic pesticides that are used that may not be appropriate in certain instances. And that's like a much bigger conversation than we can do at a 30,000, 60,000 foot view right here.
Yeah, my expectation would maybe adding a number 11 that talks about that issue. And then if there's studies in public support that comes to the council at that level, it's looking, again, there are communities that certainly have banned phosphorus fertilizers in their community. I don't want to write something that says that that's going to happen, but if that's what comes forward to the city as a priority from those groups in the citizenry, right? I guess my statement would be about supporting the goals of the organizations that brought this to our attention. Yes, no, I'm kind of looking for either head shaking or head nodding or.
So what do you need feedback on?
Whether you would like to see just a standalone kind of bullet or statement that talks about the city supporting the efforts of those groups to educate the residents about herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers of certain types within, in the watershed and along the lakes specifically.
That's more appropriate than us taking it up.
I mean, I'm on board with that. I remember like when we started getting all of those folks that live along the lake that were cutting down trees without permission, and then we had to figure out a way to work on communication. I would have loved some sort of partnership with these groups to help get the word out and help us make sure that was being honored. So in a similar vein, I think this makes sense. So I'm on board with that.
I think your comment hits on the larger problem of like vegetation generally, soil erosion prevention generally, and those education efforts, not just the pesticides and herbicides. So I appreciate that.
Okay. We will draft something to bring back. Our next one, so you have to remember we were updating sections of the old comprehensive plan, and that plan had a lot of code change recommendations. Some of them were specific to development and protections of environmental features within during development. So we removed some language from this section that talked about establishing higher levels of protection. That's because those things have been incorporated into our codes, things that were not previously spelled out in the old zoning code. If you if some of you recall working with it. It didn't have evaluation of like wooded lots for specimen trees and protection of them. It wasn't very clear on how to work around environmental features and requirements of setbacks, et cetera, from them. So, I mean, that's the reason that specific language was taken out of the comprehensive plan, because it was something that's been addressed from a staff perspective. And so, do you feel that that language should be reinserted related to amending codes for more protection above and beyond what we've already put into the current zoning code?
As you mentioned, these things were addressed since the last comprehensive plan, so it's not necessary now. If it becomes necessary in the future, we would take that up as a code amendment.
Jefferson County is asking for us to require a conservation approach to site and subdivision design. When we rewrote the zoning code, we included guidelines and the opportunity to do conservation subdivision development. Now, we haven't done any specific conservation subdivisions within the community, but the language is there to enable it. Doesn't mean we're not preserving environmental features, but conservation subdivisions are a little bit of a different animal. When we rewrote the subdivision code, we specifically added them as an opportunity, but we don't require them specifically, and this is asking us to require conservation approach. That's a policy decision.
My view is no, not require, because if a developer wants to take up a conservation development, that would be fabulous. The layout of the land and the objectives and the neighboring property development or not development would govern what any developer would want to do. And those that want to take up this opportunity, I'm all for it. But if they don't, then the circumstances might be such that it may not even be a good idea. And recall instances in the past where, no. So no, not require.
I mean, I feel like this document is meant to be more of an overarching vision, and I'm concerned that when we remove some words or add some words, it is about like I'm curious if it's like people, if there's a thought or presumption that like there's some nefarious action that's going to be happen when a word gets taken out, or like some sort of, and so I don't think that's the case. And the other thing is this is way outside my area of strength. This level of in the weeds is like my eyes start to glaze over. So I apologize when you ask questions and I can't quite give an answer. It's because I think we're getting real into some real detail here that I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, and board members help me out here, but maybe I think it's a little bit outside of the scope of what this document's supposed to be.
Mr. Grady, I totally get your concerns, right? The nefarious, like, oh my God, you removed one word and now you're putting another word in. And I agree with you that I don't think that's the case here, what's happening. I think the second paragraph of this section touches on what our concerns should be. And it's that it says there has to be an understanding that prohibiting development altogether in an otherwise suitable site will likely just redirect development to a site with equal or greater environmental considerations elsewhere. And I think that's exactly what we run into when we start to say you have to have a conservation approach. That's not always right for every site. We also run the risk of talking out of both sides of our mouth when we say we need affordable housing, but it also has to have a conservation approach. How do you balance those two things? Sometimes it becomes unaffordable. And so I think it really has to be a site-by-site, location-by-location, specific and driven consideration here. And it's something that I think by including in the comp plan, we're saying we will consider.
I see lots of head nodding, okay. Yes. So that's great direction. Again, we've always had the approach of, certainly something we want to encourage. We have codes to enable it, but far from mandating. So on stormwater management, that the city should actively educate residents, implement best practices on their own properties. I think that we've, again, established that the goal here is to encourage certain things. I think the city has been moderately proactive in stormwater issues, especially from a regional perspective. There are obviously many things that individual property owners can do, rain gardens, rain barrels, and certain design within their subdivisions and their individual properties to help with alleviating runoff issues, but does the city want to be the one that's absolutely responsible for educating and some level of implementing?
No, this is something that's probably not appropriate for this plan. If the city would ever want to do that, that would be something that the council would probably want to be, discussing and deciding on. We wouldn't put it in this kind of a document.
The document as written does highlight a number of mechanisms that can be undertaken, best management practices. There are implementation considerations that have been done by other communities in the street lawn or the terrace area that the city really hasn't done traditionally but could. It takes a tone of, we understand the importance of runoff issues, especially relates to the important natural resources we have here, and that the city is going to be evaluating them on project by projects, but really kind of turns that over to the Public Works Board and the engineers in Public Works Department to determine what is best based upon proximity of improvements to the resource, dollars available. The city is, I would say, always looking to garner grant dollars to help where it can on some of these things, but we have not taken the tone of mandating specific things for individual property owners. And so I felt the tone of the document as it relates to stormwater was appropriate, and it was reviewed by Public Works staff. And of course, it will go to the Public Works Board following this, and they may have their own kind of redlining. Are you comfortable with the tone of this?
Yes.
Sections on stormwater?
Certainly.
I think we all respect that there's always more that can be done, but there are costs associated with that.
Mr. Wolf, on 2-26 there, you just passed it.
I'm sorry.
I just had a couple of changes, second paragraph from the top of the page. Oh, wait, hold on. Your pagination is different than mine. Give me a
I'm
second
sorry.
Here. Oh,
We're at the.
it would be the section starting continue requiring progressive construction site erosion control practices. Maybe you didn't pass it.
Oh, it's down one more page.
Oh, okay, never mind. I'll let you get there.
What page?
Sorry, I was on 2-26 of the compressed draft, not the draft with these edits. I had two different versions going.
Got it.
I'm seeing it on the bottom of 227.
Okay,
Sorry, if you weren't there yet and had other things.
that
that's okay.
Okay.
So you're talking about the section here on continue requiring progressive construction site erosion control practices?
Yes, the second paragraph of that section, which bleeds onto the next page now. Ah, okay. I got cut off there. Okay, I was just in a different draft. I was just gonna make recommendations. There is some the city will explore options for funds, and I just wanted to say that we may explore options because those funds and programs that were being addressed may not always exist, aren't always there, and I just want to give us more flexibility. So that was my only suggestion, but I recognize it's not in your version that we're addressing right now.
Sorry there. It's a large draft.
I think of this version, it was 2-26.
I'm sure this makes for riveting television.
Yep, that sentence, the city, my suggestion would say the city may also explore the option of obtaining funds. And the next sentence, I would change may to say to consider, so programs may consider the DNR target runoff management program. Next sentence, programs to consider include.
I'm sorry, can you?
Yeah, that last sentence, programs to consider include
Yep.
the DNR target runoff management program, and taking may out.
Okay,
Just because those programs change or may not always be available. So I didn't want to.
understandable.
Yeah. Sorry for the long pause, everybody.
Oh, of course. And so that's kind of takes us to the end of the natural resources component of it. We have a little bit of editing to do based upon the input that you provided to us. It'll be incorporated in the draft and then provided to the Public Works Board and the Parks Board as a completion, assuming we get through the end of what we have to do. Is there anything else related to what came out of requests from RLIA and Jefferson County?
Oh, certainly.
Thank you. I brought up the county groundwater study because I thought you might want to reference it someplace in that chapter, just as something you might want to look at in the future when you're considering how to protect groundwater. I know the results won't come out until 2024, but knowing that, this is the first comprehensive study of groundwater in the county. So I think it's a very important document that you should be aware of and remember that it's there. And by putting it in the comprehensive plan, it might be a good thing for you to look at in the future.
I think we did mention it in 2-22.
We absolutely did
Okay.
reference that this study is
Okay, I
in
didn't
there.
see it. Let me,
Yeah,
sorry.
Ms. Cicero, I've just found it in 2-22. It says,
Oh, I don't have, that page wasn't included in this.
okay, it's a whole big, essentially paragraph-long sentence, but it says, basically Jefferson County is participating in the county groundwater flow study that will hopefully supply insights into the sustainable rates of water usage and how best to cooperatively manage water resources in the future.
It wasn't in this draft that was provided with the comments, so if I could see that at another time just to review it to make sure.
We'll follow up these.
Thank you.
Well, that's sort of it.
Does 2-10.
2-10?
Yeah, there was a paragraph added specifically for that. Sort of, yes.
There we go. Ms. Cicero, the language is this kind of top. On the screen, it's the top red line.
So to be clear, so what Dan showed me, there was something about the county's groundwater flow study, and it's not a flow study. So what he was showing me is different when what you have on the screen, so I don't know how to.
Yeah, I showed you exactly what Captain Bishop read.
Yeah. What page was that,
It
Dan?
is in the second half of the third paragraph on page 222. The first paragraph is a partial, so second full paragraph on the second half of that. Dan is participating in Jefferson County groundwater flow study.
Yeah, it's not.
Hopefully supply insights into the sustainable rates of water usage.
Yeah, that's on the other one.
To cooperatively manage water resources in the future.
So it is not a flow study, it's not going to talk about rates of usage, it's merely groundwater quality, so there's 12 constituents that we're going to be analyzing, and so it's more having to do with the quality of the groundwater.
So what
Is there something that?
So this
that's-
is correct.
Yeah. Is there anything missing that you think is pertinent?
No, that's correct, but the language that Dan showed me is someplace else and it's incorrect. So just want to make sure it's tidied up. But we can do that later if you would like.
Right.
I don't feel this is the forum to wordsmith
The,
every.
there is the most.
Is there- to be clear
most
then, is-
current.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Lazarus. Is there no ground flow study then? That's not existing. Okay, thank you.
There's a groundwater flow study that is referenced someplace else that I think the USGS performed, but the study that the
Okay.
county is doing is not a flow study. It's a quality study.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, I'll make a. Anything else related to this before moving on? So a full draft to date has been provided to you with formatting. When we last spoke, it was really focusing on the implementation chapter. And give me 1 second. We talked about the programs and recommendations coming out of the document, having clear reference, the champions, and then support associated with the recommendations by category. And I'm wondering, based on the input we received last time, these were the updates that were made. Has this been aligning with? Are there specific ones we need to talk about individually? Is this layout aligned with the direction you were providing to us? The takeaway we had there is, yes, there's probably going to be an internal champion for the city, but there's a lot of support organizations that need to be involved and brought to the attention of not just the reader, but to make it clear that the city is going to be leaning on others for support. Some of those are internal, whether it's staff or boards or commissions of the community, but then the important outside resources that are available from some of the groups we heard about tonight, Legendary Lake Mills and others.
Mr. Wolf, I think the changes that are made here fits with the conversation that we had at the last meeting. Thank you for doing that.
Excellent. We want it to be manageable. We don't want it to just be buried in the rest of. We want somebody able to go to this chapter and say, here are some of the key priorities, and that will be undertaken. And then we have the secondary table about ordinance and code updates as they've been discussed generally. You have to remember the last plan had a lot of recommendations on code and ordinance updates, and that's why those codes were rewritten a few years back. A lot of this is focused on monitoring or evaluating collectively potential changes to codes and ordinances as it relates to these items. We aren't calling out, I'll say, individual code changes, but making it clear that the community is going to enforce its codes and ordinances as it exists, and will always be monitoring and evaluating if changes are necessary. Questions or comments related to this? Are there things we need to single out and to look at? The last piece that Ms. Bishop had talked about is executive summary that we're working on to kind of be at the head of all of this. Handful of pages. We're trying to make it graphical. So when someone does look at this, the hows and whys of it, I think it's something that we'll distribute and, it's something to be tidied up, I think, with next month, especially after we get some feedback from the Public Works Board and Parks Board on these items. But as you can see, it's just trying to really kind of pull all those pieces together graphically. And then there are some areas where, it's a little text heavy, but appendices will be all of the summaries of the public involvement components, but those are really lengthy documents. That's why they're in appendices, not really the meat. But if someone wants to see all that was said from the surveys and the focus groups and such, and then the general comments received, but these are, I think, it's more graphical summary. And then hanging a little more meat on what is the plan proposed. thoughts?
I thought it was well done, and when you put it, obviously a lot of time went into this, so I appreciate you and your team.
We have a little more refinement on it, of course, but then we'll get it distributed and available to everyone to review. So expectations for next month would be summaries or red lines that come out of the other boards to bring those to your attention, and then kind of having I'll say the final of the final drafts to be able to get to a point of having the formal open book period. Do you feel we're at that point?
Certainly, and then is this going to go now to the Public Works Board and the Parks Board for their comments back before we meet again?
Yep, we're planning on taking it to the Public Works Board and the Parks Board in their May meetings. I'm trying to think if there's others that we're bringing it to as well, but bringing it to the relevant boards and commissions before it comes back to you for your final resolution for adoption.
And of course, for the public to see an entirely completed, kind of non-redlined draft version of the document to get their feedback.
Yeah. Plan commissioners, staff, is there anything else that you want to talk about in regards to where we are with the comprehensive plan update? Well, that would bring us then to item number 7, recommendations for future agendas. It seems like there was something the last month that was appeared in the minutes, and that was has to do with an overlay. And I don't know where that what happened to that, but
I can kind of
yeah.
I can kind of update on. I guess many months ago I brought some items to staff in regard to some changes to the zoning, to existing zoning code. At the time, I wasn't prepared with specifics on the area I'm talking about, and the specific is I believe it will address bulk regulations regarding setbacks of driveways primarily and garages. I mentioned it to Mrs. Bishop last month. She was interested, and I believe she wanted to have a discussion item. I basically need a little help in defining this. I'm sure staff will help write the motion, but we're so far from that. And I believe Pam not seconded it, but agreed that we should. So it just didn't appear on the agenda. It was something that we need to define in detail. Mm-hmm. And I'd like the commission members to be part of it. Okay. So I don't know how it gets on the agenda, just for a discussion item to begin with, right, Mrs. Bishop?
Yeah, what I hear you saying is you want to discuss certain overlays, particularly in regard to some of the more historical neighborhoods, and that you would like plan commission input as to maybe the boundaries of what that overlay would be, what that overlay would include in terms of restrictions or not, or protections or not. And I hear you saying that's why you would like to have it be a discussion item before it goes to a more defined resolution that we would then act on at a different future meeting.
Yeah, we probably need to discuss it to make it more specific for guidance.
So I hear you asking for that as an agenda item, which is what I asked for at the last meeting as well. So we're not ready for resolution. So, I mean, just putting it as an agenda item would be what I would ask for again at this point.
Perhaps it would be helpful to have a map of the area that you're thinking about. And then with some, maybe shade the area on the map, and then you could make some comments on the side. You could just handwrite some comments about your thinking about what should occur in such an overlay district, and then that would be, in my view, enough to start a discussion. And I think if we did that, but that would be a starting point.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other item we will have is a public hearing for a conditional use for an ice cream shop down near Sandy Beach.
Oh, very well. Okay.
Right.
Well, wonderful. All right. That sounds good. Is there anything else under future agendas? All right. In that case, we go to item number 8, which is adjournment.
Move to adjourn.
Mr. Coots will second.
It's been moved by Mr. Grady and seconded by Mr. Coots to adjourn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We are adjourned.